Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas, and in this video I'm going to share with you my top tips for working from home. So with all that's going on in the world right now, there's going to be a lot more people who are going to start working from home. So what I thought I would do is actually dedicate an episode just to my top 5 tips for doing exactly that, working from home. So as some of you may know, I am a graphic designer and a web developer, and I run my own business. And as a part of that, for the last several years, I have been working primarily at home. Now, there has been some times in the past, obviously not now, but in the past, there's been times when I've gone out and I have worked at various places remotely, whether that's going to be at a coffee shop or a library, some sort of remote location. But primarily, the majority of my work has been done at home. So at one point in time, I remember a while back, I was out getting a cappuccino and the barista was just asking me about the type of work that I did, and I explained I work from home, and I was giving her some idea of like the type of work that I do. And then at one point she's like, oh, that must be so nice because you could just wake up at noon and you just put on your fuzzy slippers and you just kind of make your own schedule, and it's wonderful. What I ended up conveying to her was that when you're running your own business, you have a self-invested interest in ensuring that you're up early and that you are working a very productive number of hours, or being very productive with your time. Otherwise, you're not going to make it for very long. So one of the things that can be challenging, particularly if you're not really used to working from home, are kind of creating for yourself an environment in which you are able to get a lot done. I do realize that everybody's different. Some people have family with kids, other people maybe don't have kids. Whatever your situation, obviously you're going to have to mold it to what your particular situation is. So what I'm going to be doing is just, like I said, giving you my top 5 tips so that you can apply them however you see best to your particular situation. Okay, so the first tip I would give you is to create for yourself a dedicated workspace. Now, like I said earlier, this is going to change based upon each person and each person's situation. But what you do want to do is that you make sure that you pick a specific place that you call your workplace. What I typically recommend to people is don't just grab the laptop or the tablet and just sit on the couch. That's not going to work. You're just opening up yourself to distractions that don't need to be there. So even if you take a corner on the dining room table, or you take a desk and you put it in the corner somewhere, or if you're fortunate enough to have a room that you can dedicate to it, whatever it is, just set it aside and make it your specific workspace. There's a couple of other things that I'm going to recommend as well when it comes to your workspace. What you want to make sure is that you keep it very clean and minimalistic. I don't know if it's a psychological thing, but I can tell you from personal experience, a clean and tidy desk is a productive desk. Meaning that if you've got a whole bunch of stuff around your desk that doesn't need to be there, it just kind of adds to the chaos of not really knowing what you need to be doing next. So keep it very clean, keep it very orderly, and be very cognizant of what it is that you have on your desk. So for example, an idea, something that you would not want sitting on your desk is like a TV remote, right? Because A, it doesn't need to be there, and B, it's sitting there waiting for you to turn on the TV, and before you know it, Netflix is on in the background and you're not getting anything done. So when it comes to your desk, use the philosophy, when in doubt, keep it out. Just keep it really simple. Obviously, I'm not talking about things like knickknacks. If you've got a picture of your family, things like that obviously makes sense having those on your desk. The main point is to just get rid of any distractions that you can, particularly in the space around you. If you think it's going to distract you to have it there, then remove it. I've even done in the past, if your cell phone, if you haven't disabled notifications, and you need to keep them on for whatever reason, or you don't feel like disabling them, even take your cell phone and move it into a completely different room. Whatever it is that you need to do to ensure that you're going to be productive, make sure that that is created in the space in which you are working. Okay, so once you have your workspace set aside and you know that this is where, like, I am going to go to work, quote unquote, this is my workspace, then you need to start to think through what you want to do for your schedule. This is another area in which a lot of new entrepreneurs or freelancers end up falling down or having some difficulties. Again, that is their schedule. So what I recommend, and I've talked about this in videos in the past, is to create for yourself a daily roadmap, if you will. So I've talked about a web app that I made that's totally free that helps with this called Radarist. Also, I've talked about how I use something called the Full Focus Planner to plan out my daily big three and then associated tasks that I need to tackle after I finish those daily big three. So having that as a starting point is really useful. But beyond that, one of the things that I would recommend is creating for yourself some sort of structured daily schedule. What is your workday going to look like? Because for most of us, when we go into an office, we have to be there by whatever time, right? We have to be there by 8 a.m. and that's when the day starts. When you're at home, it's a lot easier to be loosey-goosey. You just get up a little bit later or a little bit earlier here. And that can start to eat away at the productive time that you need. So you don't necessarily have to work from 8 to 5. You know what makes sense for your situation. But I would recommend setting a schedule that you're going to stick to, even if it's only a 4-hour schedule. Whatever that schedule needs to be, make sure that you create it so that you're at least intentional with your time. What is your workday? What does it look like to ensure that you are getting the amount of work done that you need to in order to be efficient working from home? Okay, so beyond just making the schedule, one of the things that I have talked about in the past before that can be really useful in tandem with something like the Full Focus Planner or using something like Radarist is to work in some sort of calendar blocking, right? So there's two options here. You can either do calendar blocking or kind of a set amount of time for just having a serious focus mode, right? So what does this look like? So calendar blocking, it's pretty simple. You're going to take item number 1 on your daily big three, or the most important thing that you have to get done that day. You're going to go to your calendar and you're going to say from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. I'm going to work on this particular task to ensure that it's moving forward and or getting done, right? And then you're going to say from 10:30 to noon, I'm going to work on the second task, and you get the idea. All you're doing is you're taking your tasks and you're blocking them out on your calendar to give yourself specific amounts of time to ensure that you are working on them. If not finishing them, then moving them forward. The other option, let's say you've got a whole bunch of smaller tasks and you're not necessarily working on a big project. So let's say you don't necessarily need to take one task and then dedicate an hour or an hour and a half to it, right? You just need an hour or maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours to just focus on work, right? And work includes maybe answering a bunch of emails and then like going through some support tickets or recording a podcast or something like that. So you just need a chunk of time that you can get that done. So what you want to do is create for yourself kind of this focus time, right? Where you jump in there and you cut out all notifications. If you're using a Mac, you turn off all notifications on there. If you've got an iPhone, you turn off that, or whatever type of phone or device you're using. You cut out all distractions. You make sure that you don't have Facebook or Instagram or Twitter open. All those are closed. You've closed your email account, so you're not going to get notifications for email. You're just going to sit there and you're going to focus and you're going to work on whatever it is you're working on. So again, if you're writing a blog post or doing a podcast or whatever that task is, or series of tasks that requires a good amount of focus, then you want to make sure that you're focusing on that item. Now, when it comes to actually sitting down and doing that work, again, we're still kind of on item number 2, which is kind of an expansive one, but there's a couple of different ways that you can approach this. So I'm kind of sharing my experience. So I do 2 very different types of work, and maybe you can relate to this. I do one that is very much requires a high level of focus and concentration to detail in order for it to be done successfully. And that's going to be the coding aspect of what I do. So I code a lot of websites. So I'm writing PHP and HTML and CSS and JavaScript and all that stuff. So if I miss a semicolon, the website breaks. So it requires a very high level of focus. So for that type of work, what I don't do is have like a podcast or an audiobook on in the background. I don't do that. Sometimes it will have music, whether it's classical or whatever it is. music without words. Now each person is different, but I found if the music has words in it, sometimes that can distract me. But if it's just music without words, so I typically go with some type of classical, then I find that actually kind of helps me focus. So for a very focused, like for example, if you're going to be writing something, whether it's an email or a blog post or a book, writing practices, typically you want to keep some, if you need background noise, try to make sure that it isn't really distracting. Now, a second type of work, if you're doing something more creative, like in my situation, if I'm designing something. So if I'm doing a UI mock-up or design for a website, if I'm working on a book jacket, if I'm working on a logo or brand identity, that doesn't require quite as high level of a focus. Like it's not quite as detail oriented. I don't need to quite be as laser focused on making sure that everything I'm working on lines up to a certain spec, right? It's creative work. At that point in time, I will have on like a podcast or an audiobook or something like that in the background, because I can actually process and listen to it as I'm working on something. So maybe if you're doing some tasks that maybe they're not creative like design, but maybe you've got just a whole bunch of like invoices you're entering or things that don't require perhaps a higher level of focus or attention in order to do them efficiently. Sometimes having a podcast or an audiobook on in the background can help you get through that work. Okay, so the first two tips, one was to make sure that you have a dedicated workspace, two, that you're very intentional with your schedule as you're going through and doing your work. The next three tips I wanted to share with you are actually specific tools. Now, you don't have to use these tools, but having something like them is seriously going to help. So the first of those is one called Calendly. So obviously, if you're working from home, that doesn't necessarily mean that though you are, in a sense, isolated, you're not necessarily isolated from the rest of the world in order to do your work. You need to be able to schedule meetings either with coworkers or clients or customers. And Calendly is a great way to do that. It makes it simple for you to create your own calendar page. You can specify time blocks when you're available, and then you can send that link to all your clients or customers or coworkers, and then they can just access your calendar page, pick a date, pick a time, and then book a time with you. You get an email, they get an email letting them and you know that they've scheduled a time with you. They can even get follow-up emails letting them know as reminders that their meeting is about to occur. That way, the great thing about Calendly and why I've been using it for so long is you can avoid a lot of those really annoying email threads where you're like, are you available on Friday? And they write back and they're like, no, let's try Monday. Monday work for you? And you're like, no, Monday does not work for me. What about Tuesday? You know what I'm talking about. When you're writing each other back and forth, and then you never really, it takes 5 emails to determine when both of you are available. Whereas if you had something like Calendly, it's 2 or 3 clicks, a couple of automated emails get sent out, and it's done. It saves you and them a bunch of time, and it makes life a whole lot easier. Okay, so the next tool I'm going to recommend, and you probably already have this, you may, if not, you're definitely going to want to get this, which is some sort of conferencing software. So what I typically recommend to most people is Zoom, because with its free version, you've got a lot of features packed in there. So if you got to have a meeting with 3 or 4 or 5 people at a time, Zoom makes that really easy. It just gives you a Zoom link that you can send out via email to all the people who need to be able to connect on the Zoom call. The great thing about Zoom is that it's not quite like a phone call. You actually get to see people's faces. And beyond that, if you've got a type of work where maybe you need to, like if you're a designer like me, or if you've got some sort of more visual work that you do, and maybe you've got a coworker who typically likes to stand behind you, look over your shoulder and say, do this, do that, right? You can't really do that when you're working from different places, right? Well, the nice thing about using something like Zoom is that you can do that, because what you're able to do is share your screen. So if you've got 4 or 5 other people, or just one other person who's watching the meeting or on the meeting with you, you can share your screen and you can show them live exactly what it is that you're doing or you need to show them. So in those situations where you'd walk down the hall and say, Bill or Sally, whoever, can you show me how to do this on this software? You don't have to worry about that. You can do that with something like Zoom. If you don't like Zoom or you're looking for something a little bit more simple and you just need a face-to-face conversation with one other person, I'd recommend just using something like Skype. It's free. Most people already have an account. If they don't, it's really easy to set up. but you just want to make sure that you have some sort of way to very simply and easily continue those conversations that you were having in person, and make them as effective and useful, a useful use of time as possible, particularly if you're going to be working remotely for a long period of time. And the last one I wanted to recommend is one that I'm actually pretty surprised that more people don't use, particularly if you're going to be running a smaller business, and that is a tool called Grasshopper. Now, in an office area or an office setup, a lot of people have departments and phones that go throughout the entire department, so that you've heard it before. You call in and you say, press 1 to reach the accounting department, press 2 to reach technical support, or whatever it is. Well, the great thing about Grasshopper is it allows you to do exactly that, but it can actually connect with any type of phone. So what you can do is you can actually go in there and you can set up any number of extensions. And then with those extensions, you can have, let's say you've got a bookkeeper who lives in a different state even. You can say, you can create your own menu system and you record it and you go in there, or you can hire someone and have them do the voiceover for you if you wanted to. But they go in there and they say, press 1 to reach the accounting department or my bookkeeper. And then if they press 1, what happens is you configure it so that once they press 1, it goes to that person's cell phone or whatever phone number that you want. Then you can say press 2 to reach me, or, to reach our consulting department, or whatever you want to call it. And then that would go to your cell phone, or, if to leave a message, press 3. Then if somebody decides to leave a message, the great thing about Grasshopper as well is that it's going to transcribe it and email you a copy of that message. You can also do SMS, so if you need to be able to receive text messages, or if you want to be able to receive faxes, you can receive faxes as well. So they pack a lot of features into this. I've been using it for years. I first got it specifically because I just wanted to be able to have a phone number that I could call from that wasn't my personal phone number. So I actually happened to get 844 Rightly. So you can also get it so that it's you can actually, if the phone number is available, you can even get your brand in there as the number. So highly recommend it. It's a great service, particularly if you're working with a small team, or you've got a bigger team and they're all working from home right now, and you need an easy way to be able to transfer to different departments when they all live in different places. Something like Grasshopper is indispensable. Okay, so I know I threw a lot at you today in terms of all the different tools or tips that you can use when you're starting to work from home. You'll find that with a little creativity and some adjustments that you can actually become just as, and sometimes even more productive working from home than if you were in an office environment. So one of the things I also wanted to mention today is that there is actually a brand new site design over at Rightly & Company, so Rightly.co. I've created a new area now where you can log in and you can actually create your own account that will enable you to watch any and all Rightly TV episodes, as well as brand new episodes, which are starting this week, of the Rightly Show podcast. So you're going to be able to take a look at podcast episode, past videos. You can search. They're going to be categorized. You can also check off a video once you've watched it, so you can mark it as complete. There'll be additional videos that are only going to be available to subscribers over there. A subscription is totally free. So go ahead and check that out. Go over to Rightly.co, create your free account. You can go through, and I've even worked in a feature where you can bookmark videos or podcast episodes or articles so that you can always keep track of those things that you want to learn or dive into in more in depth. Plus, we're just going to be having a whole bunch of new content that's going to be available over there in the future as well. So head on over to Rightly.co to check that out, create your free account. Also, make sure you go to Rightly.show. As I mentioned, we're going to be starting a new season of the Rightly Show. It's going to be completely different content than what I'm doing here on Rightly TV, which will continue, but you want to make sure that you don't miss it. So head on over to Rightly.co as well as Rightly.show so that you don't miss any of it. So until next time, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.